Have you ever had that feeling where your thoughts are just racing way faster than you could ever type or even speak them out loud? Well, guess what? That's a problem we humans have been trying to solve for literally thousands of years. Today, we're going to dive into this incredible, ancient quest to expand the bandwidth of our own minds. A journey that starts with ancient clay and ends with, well, something that looks a lot like telepathy. To really get a handle on where we're going, we have to look way, way back. The leap we're on the verge of making with tech like Neuralink, it's not just another little update. People are comparing it to the invention of writing itself. That first moment we figured out how to take a thought out of our head and chisel it into reality. That's a fundamental shift. And just look at this. It really puts the whole timeline into perspective, doesn't it? For millennia, we went from clay to paper to the printing press, but the basic idea was always the same: translate thoughts into symbols. Now, for the very first time, we're looking at a future where we might get to skip the symbols altogether.
So let's start with that first great leap forward. Because cuneiform, the first form of writing, it wasn't just for keeping track of grain shipments. No way. You can think of it as humanity's very first external hard drive. It was a complete reboot of what the human mind was even capable of.
And you might think this first version was, super basic, but nope. The ancient Babylonians, using these little clay tablets, they developed a language just as rich and subtle as anything we have today. It could handle everything from super complex legal codes to beautiful, moving poetry. It just blew the doors open on our entire cognitive and cultural world. Okay, so we've got this incredible software upgrade, but the hardware? Our brains? Well, they've got some serious bugs. Our minds are incredibly powerful, but you gotta think of them as a deeply flawed operating system, one with some known vulnerabilities that, frankly, can be pretty easily exploited. Let's just run through some of the big ones, right? Our brains are wired to love simple, emotional stories more than messy, complex truths, which is basically the engine of all propaganda. Researchers have shown you can literally implant detailed, false memories into people's minds. Our focus is constantly being hijacked by our devices, and we are just suckers for a simple hero versus villain story, which completely shuts down our ability to see any nuance. So, if our mental OS is this buggy, what's the fix? Well, people are getting really creative. They're turning to all sorts of manual workarounds, new mindsets and biohacks, basically trying to patch their own systems to get better performance. One of the most powerful mental workarounds is just breaking free from being too specialized. A specialist, they're an expert, but they risk getting trapped in this tiny box, trying to solve every problem with the same old hammer. The polymath, on the other hand, is all about connecting ideas from totally different fields to create something brand new. They don't just think outside the box, they break the box entirely. And then you get into the physical hacks, and this is where things get a little weird, but also kind of brilliant. You've got people jumping on trampolines to get their lymphatic system going, or holding a cold can of soda to trick their brain's anxiety response right before a big speech. And get this, using the hard data from a sleep tracker as the ultimate motivation to finally cut back on alcohol. These are all these clever attempts to manually tune our own biology. But these are all manual patches, right? What if we can move beyond the hacks and just install the ultimate hardware upgrade? Well, that's the next great leap. It's an attempt to solve our bandwidth problem right at the source with something called a brain-computer interface, or BCI. And the key thing to grasp here is the sheer scale of the ambition. This isn't about getting a 10% speed boost. The goal is to jump from the speed of speech to something that could be 1,000 times faster. We're talking about a form of digital telepathy, where thoughts are transmitted directly. And look, this isn't some sci-fi dream anymore. It's happening. Right now. This is a quote from Nolan Arbach, the very first human Neuralink patient. It was this incredible moment right after surgery where he just tried to move his finger and he saw this spike of data on a screen. For the first time, he was literally seeing his own intention as a digital signal. So, let's break that down. What actually is a BCI? At its core, it's a direct line. It's a pathway that reads the electrical signals of your brain, your intentions, and translates them into commands for a computer or a device. So you can move a cursor on a screen just by thinking about it. But getting this to work in reality, oh man, that was an absolute beast of an engineering problem. The team had to knock down these huge bottlenecks one by one. First, they had to kill any lag from Bluetooth, because if you can't get the data off the implant in real time, nothing else matters. Then they had to build way smarter software that could learn to translate all that noisy brain data into what the user actually wants to do. And finally, they had to make the whole system stable so it felt smooth and reliable, just like using your own hand.
And this right here, this is where it gets really mind-blowing. The true breakthrough isn't just control, it's multitasking. Nolan can move the cursor with his mind while he's having a conversation. Now think about that for a second. You can't do that with eye tracking. You can't do that with voice commands. A BCI unlocks this kind of parallel processing that feels completely natural, like a new sense.
And that brings us right back to where we started, doesn't it? From scratching thoughts onto clay tablets to beaming them at the speed of light. The entire story of our species has been this long, slow march to close the gap between minds. So the final question is, what happens when we finally close it? What new ideas, what new art, what new worlds will we be able to create together?